lifting up Jesus, opening his word from Australia, Denmark, Israel, Japan, New Zealand, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, Singapore, South Africa, United Kingdom, Thailand, the Philippines, United States, and throughout the world. You're watching Moriel TV.
To all of our Christian friends around the world, Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I send you these greetings from Jerusalem. I'm standing in the courtyard of this magnificent international Christian embassy. I'm so proud of our relations with our Christian brothers and sisters. I wonder, for many of you, if you remember the experience you had when you first visited Israel, when you saw the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, or the Via Dolorosa, or the Sea of Galilee, or Nazareth. I'm sure it moved you deeply. And it moves us deeply to have this bond with you, because we all know that this land of Israel is the land of our common heritage. It changed the story of humanity. It changed civilization. What a magnificent heritage it is. Yet we also know that it is under attack these days, that the forces of intolerance, of barbarism, that attack all religions, attack Christians with particular vehemence. We stand with you. And I'm proud of the fact that in Israel, this is the one place in the Middle East that the Christian community not only survives, but thrives. And it's no accident. It's because of our commitment to religious freedom. It's because of our embrace of our heritage. It's because of our embrace of our common future. So please come to Israel. Come and visit me. I'm waiting for you. It'll be a great experience for you. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Hi, this is Tim from Moriel TV and Moriel Radio, here with James Jacob Prasch, live from England, and this is This Week in Prophecy.
Blessings in Jesus, dear friends, as we commence the new year of 2018, the civil new year, the first This Week in Prophecy. Holidays being over, we look forward to the future. And as usual, focus is on the Middle East. Questions are being asked about the uprising in Iran. As expected, an orchestrated crackdown by the military, by the police, and by the Iranian Republican Guards is well underway. To date, at least 21 people have been killed by the Iranian authorities and over 1,000 arrested. But these protests have been widespread. They've not just been in main cities, they've been in medium-sized and even smaller cities, and have involved anywhere from thousands to tens of thousands of people, chanting things like "end to dictatorship." Now, in 2009, they were very specific. They were not looking for a fundamental regime change. The protesters were addressing certain issues. This time, although the economy and the corruption are being focally addressed, it is extended to the areas of human rights and Iran's foreign policy, opposing itself to the Gulf states, to Israel, and to the United States and the West. It has broadened its spectrum of protest to encompass several issues, not simply the issues of financial corruption and mismanagement of the economy that is wreaking havoc on both the middle class and on the poor. We have to remember that most of the radical people in Islam who support the mullahs are uneducated people, and the mullahs themselves tend to be uneducated people. There are, of course, exceptions, but it's something where you have a social class that is easily manipulated. The government has been mobilizing these in counter-protest in order to try to stop any regime change or anything that would threaten the status quo within Iran. But the situation has been very different in 2009. And unlike the Obama administration, which supported the pro-terrorist regime, the Trump administration certainly is not. It will be interesting to see what happens, but it does create a complex situation and how it should be managed in terms of Western and American foreign policy. At the same time, more and more sanctions and more embargoes are being placed against Iran because of their weapons development and their support of terror. We do not want to hurt the people who are rising up against the regime. It's always a give and take, a touch and go state of affairs that's not always easy to understand. How does the West support those who want change, while at the same time take punitive action against the existing regime? The crackdown is obvious. The counter movement is obvious, and they were to be expected. What is clear is, even if it is suppressed, it's not going to stop. There'll be a permanent undercurrent that can resurface at any time in the future, and the regime, of course, knows this. Now, when a regime has this kind of instability, what regimes of this sort, despotic regimes, normally do is they follow the Mao line. When Mao saw the Cultural Revolution getting out of control with Zhou Enlai, what Mao did was he launched a border confrontation with military skirmishes along the Amur River with the Soviet Union. He used an external military threat as a way in order to reunite the country that had fragmented during the Cultural Revolution. Iran is not unlikely to do the same thing. It will engineer a strategic crisis of conflict with the West, with Israel, with the Gulf states, with whoever, in order to bring an artificial unity to the country to preserve its own neck. That is the way despotic regimes have normally operated, and we can expect Iran to operate the same way, barring unforeseen developments. Already, Iran is blaming the CIA for the uprising within Iran, while at the same time, the United States is insisting that it is an organic uprising from the populace of Iran, which the West or America or the CIA has had nothing whatsoever to do with. But let us continue watching this situation in Iran this week in prophecy. This week in prophecy, an American charity that has international branches called the HHRD, the Helping Hand for Relief and Development, nice name, has participated in a major Islamic conference in Iran in partnership with terrorist organizations. The Fidei Insienet Foundation, which is a wing of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, are responsible for the 2008 Mumbai massacres in Turkey, where these radical Islamists with a base in Pakistan came into Mumbai, that is Bombay, India, attacked hotels, hospitals, tourist sites, murdering innocent people indiscriminately. Yet they're represented at this conference. Also, Al-Khidmat in 1971, who were responsible for the genocide in Bangladesh, backed by Pakistan against what was then East Pakistan, later to become Bangladesh, that provided the background that led to the concert of Bangladesh by the late George Harrison of the Beatles, bringing it into notoriety in Western youth culture. The perpetrators of that genocide received 100,000, the perpetrators of that genocide were also participants at this same conference. An additional $100,000 was given to Hamas, another organization listed as a terrorist organization by the American government. Why is HHRD allowed to operate as a charity in the United States? It is long time that Islamic charities who are involved with terror, either domestically or externally, be closed down and lose their status. We would argue that the Council of American Islamic Relations should lose its status and be closed down on grounds of national security. 3 times its officials were found as unindicted co-conspirators in raising money to fund terror organizations. But let us continue looking at this. This organization, HHRD, has in the past been funded by Bill Gates' Microsoft Foundation. by the British government and by the World Health Organization. It has no legitimacy, and it is in bed with radical organizations that are plainly terror-linked. Yet, it's given an official seal of approval and given money by the British taxpayer. Why? Why? This continual pandering to radical Islam. This week in prophecy. Tremendous political debate has been taking place in the Israeli Knesset and in the press concerning a new law that would allow the death penalty for terrorists to be applied by both civilian and military courts. At the present time, the death penalty can only very, very rarely be applied in extremely unusual circumstances, such as that of the Nazi murderer Adolf Eichmann. It's so complicated legally, requiring the decision of so many judges from so many courts at different levels, that functionally and practically, there is no death penalty in Israel. The battle rages, however, not simply the left versus the right, but the fear that executing terrorists would increase terrorist violence against the Israelis. It is a lose-lose situation. The terrorists are going to try to murder Israelis and others, whether Israel has a death penalty or not. This is an argument that does not hold a lot of practical water in dealing with the terrorist mentality, particularly the radical Islamist terrorist mentality, which sees dying in a jihad as the sure way to salvation. Even some Israeli military commanders have expressed the view that applying the death penalty could lead to concerted efforts for kidnappings and criminal abductions of Israeli civilians and military personnel. That is one fear, that they would abduct people in order to prevent executions and execute the Israelis who they've abducted in response. The debate rages on, but it is again very much a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Obviously, the best is to adopt a policy of take no prisoners. Once a terrorist engages in an act of terror, it has to be understood that they will not be captured, they will be shot on sight. That would be the only practical alternative. Now, this issues questions of international law and of the Geneva Convention. However, these terrorists are like those in Guantanamo, illegal combatants. They're not protected by the Geneva Conventions. If a policy was enacted where any terrorist engaged in an act of terror who attempts to surrender would be shot dead on sight, there would be no surrender. This would raise further debates, not only ethical and legal, but would it give more incentive for people to try to kill more before they are shot themselves? It is a hopeless argument, on either side. Both positions will be met with a counter-argument that is equally as valid. We do hope and pray that the Lord will give the Israeli government wisdom in dealing with this situation of capital execution of terrorists. There is no easy solution nor easy way out. But the battle is raging this week in prophecy. On New Year's Eve, it is reported from multiple sources, though firmly denied by Russia, that Syrian rebels attacked an airbase at Khmeimena. And in this attack, a total of 7 Russian aircraft were destroyed. 4 Su or Sukhoi 24s, 2 Su-35s, and 1 AN-72 transport plane. Munitions depot, plus a munitions depot that was adjacent to the airfield, being absolutely destroyed at the same time during these attacks. This week in prophecy to Syria, the last day of 2017, New Year's Eve, the 31st of December, multiple reports have emerged, some of them from diplomatic sources, saying that the Russian airbase at Khmeimena was attacked by Syrian rebels using mortars, that they destroyed an adjacent ammunition depot, but destroyed additionally 7 Russian military aircraft. including 4 Su or Sukhoi 24s, 2 Su-35s, and 1 AN-72 transport plane. This would be the largest and costliest loss of military apparatus the Russians have experienced since their involvement in Syria, if true. The Russians are denying the reports, but the reports are being widely circulated inside and outside of Syria. It does show that Russia does not have the power or free hand that it wishes to have if these reports can be verified. On Wednesday of this week, the IAF, Israeli Air Force, hit major terror infrastructural facilities in Gaza in retaliation for the recent rocket attacks launched again on the suburbs of Tel Aviv. The rocket attacks, which fell into Israeli territory, did no damage, but the Israelis did respond with airstrikes. The developments that have been taking place in Gaza over the last 6 to 8 months have been unique. Things are transpiring that have not happened before in the same way. Hamas, in desperation, are trying to placate the Palestinian Authority, who have asked the Israelis, the Palestinians, asking the Israelis to curtail electrical supplies and utility supplies to Gaza. So now it is not the Israelis doing something, it is the Palestinian Authority enacting punitive action against Hamas and those who are ruled by Hamas inside of the Gaza Strip. There are similar actions by the Egyptian government. As a result, Hamas is attempting to placate the Egyptians to maintain some kind of a functional sphere of operations, given the opposition they're facing from both Mahmoud Abbas and from General Assisi in Egypt. But it has now gone one step further this week in prophecy. ISIS in the Sinai has beheaded a member of Hamas. They've decapitated him. Ironically, inexplicably, they are blaming Hamas for Trump's relocation, for Donald Trump's relocation of the American embassy to Jerusalem, saying that Hamas failed to stop it. They are also blaming Hamas for the placation of the Egyptian government, bearing in mind it was ISIS who attacked the Ahmadi mosque, murdering 300 peaceful Ahmadi Muslims in the Sinai approximately 3.5 weeks ago. Again, we have never said that all Muslims are terrorists or that there are not peaceful Muslim sects. The Ahmadis are among those who are peaceful, but faced butchering and murder at the hands of radical Islamic terror in the Sinai. But now ISIS is beheading Hamas, terrorists killing other terrorists. We see this as the hand of God, turning them against each other. The curse in Genesis, Esau's sword will be against his brother. Meanwhile, this week in prophecy, the United States has begun to impose sanctions on various Iranian economic and industrial entities, beginning with 5 firms involved in the development of the Iranian missile delivery system. The United States also plans to ask the UN Human Rights Commission to investigate the 21 killed and 1,000 arrested in ongoing violence inside of Iran, where peaceful protest is being cracked down upon. While the UN is very quick to condemn anything Israel does, even in self-defense, they've been curiously silent, as usual, when the human rights abuses, civil rights abuses take place in an Islamic country. Nikki Haley will be pushing for a UN action concerning Iran. In the meantime, however, what is unique about the imposition of these sanctions against select industries that are going to be expanded is that it's not because of involvement in the development of nuclear weapons, but rather the development of missiles, delivery systems for those weapons that could be capable of hitting Israel, capable of hitting Riyadh, of Jeddah, and of other targets in the Middle East. The Obama administration and John Kerry completely left the development of missiles and delivery system off the agenda in their sellout, their illegal treaty, their betrayal to Iranian terror. giving them $150 billion in unfrozen assets, plus a secret payoff that was completely illegal and that should have been a subject of indictment. Nonetheless, Trump administration has not played the same game. The Trump administration is not only acting on the development of nuclear weapons, it has begun to address the issue of the delivery system in the form of guided missiles. This week in prophecy. Meanwhile, the Iranian prosecutor general, Mohammad Jafar Maratan, has been blaming the US CIA for discontent within Iran itself, simply claiming that what is transpiring in Iran is a result of CIA-launched activities inside the country. Again, emphatically denied by the American State Department and the White House. But we come to our main issue this week in prophecy. I'm sorry, leave that out. Meanwhile, this week in prophecy, the Gatestone Institute has published a paper by Philip Carl Salzman looking at the issue of Islamic immigration into Western countries, not only Europe, but including Canada and the United States. He looks at the presuppositions of those who are welcoming Islamic immigration into Western countries, beginning with cultural relativism, which says that all cultures are equally good. Presuppositionally, all cultures are equally good. This has been a presupposition of the organized left, of probably Angela Merkel's regime in Germany, and of others sympathetic to allowing open Islamic immigration, that all cultures are equally good. When we look at the 57 Islamic countries in the world, however, what Western mind would say it is good? Where you have Sharia, where you have the suppression of human rights, civil rights, women's rights, the suppression of religious freedom of Christians and religious minorities, and it is culturally ingrained. It is not simply legal. It is in the cultural fabric of those societies to treat women as they do, to treat non-Muslims called infidels as they do, and to apply Sharia to everyday life in the circumstances of simply earning a living and getting by day to day. It is culturally ingrained. It is not simply legal nor simply religious. Yet this cultural relativism, that all cultures are equally good, is presuppositional to a deluded Western mind. Now, either they are deluded or they're simply stupid people. There's no euphemism for such stupidity. I've been from one end of the Muslim world to the other. I've been in Brunei, where I saw people living on top of lagoons infested with human waste, in stinking equatorial heat. And that's how they live, adjacent to the palatial existence of the Sultan, who lives so salubriously you couldn't even imagine the wealth and the right next to this unspeakable poverty. The national oil wealth is his, but the people are living a subhuman existence. I've been there and I've seen that kind of poverty. Cultural relativism. Yet it's accepted. How can all cultures be co-equally good? Second is multiculturalism, that the desire of a multicultural society is something to be desired. Where has that worked? We come back to the book of Daniel, the iron and the clay. Iron does not adhere to clay. You cannot have a culture whose values are fundamentally alien to the values of a constitutional democracy. You cannot have a culture based on Sharia, Islamic law, coexisting with a culture based on constitutional Bill of Rights and think they're going to be somehow mutually enriching. Already in Great Britain, you have the pandering of the British legal system to Sharia courts. We're lending legal credence to these people. They're going to be pushing for polygamous marriages. They're already getting extravagant social benefits being funded by Westerners largely. how is this multiculturalism desirable? My challenge is to find one country anywhere in the world that has allowed Islamic immigration that has not reaped social havoc, violence, terror as a result. One convenient example is Denmark. 4% Muslim population, yet 40% of the people on the dole on public benefit are Muslim, even though they're only 4% of the population. 70% of the convicted rapists in Danish prisons are Muslim. 90% of their victims are Danish women. It's similar in every country where you have Islamic immigration. As we speak, the governments of Eastern European countries who refuse to live in the fictitious world of Angela Merkel have been standing up to her and to the EU and to German hegemony in Europe. Poland and Hungary are refusing to modify their positions on open immigration, as demanded by Angela Merkel's Germany, using their economic leverage to extract political concessions from the less affluent countries of Eastern Europe, demanding that they take more Muslims. We stand by and agree with the governments of Poland and Hungary and the other countries of Eastern Europe who live in the real world and refuse to give in to Angela Merkel's hideous demands that will do nothing but result in further Islamic radicalism and terror. Who can forget a year ago when she opened the gates to an influx of Islamic so-called asylum seekers who should have been going to Muslim countries, and they were displayed on national TV, groping and sexually harassing in open public at Christmas pageants German women, thinking there's nothing wrong with it. This is cultural relativism. This is the multiculturalism. Thank God that the new Europe, Poland and Hungary, have more sense than the old Europe of Angela Merkel. We do know, however, that many fine people in Germany do not agree with her. She did not do very well in the last election. May she lose the next one. That is my personal view. Although I cannot use a Christian platform to lobby or campaign for any one political party, her policies are detrimental to Germany and to Europe. But it's happening this week in prophecy, in Poland and in Hungary. There's also the issue of the willingness to assimilate into the popular culture highlighted in the Gatestone Institute's report. We've always had small minorities who did not integrate or assimilate into the mainstream culture. Even in the United States, we have the Amish people, so-called Pennsylvania Dutch, and we have Hasidic Jews, They speak dialects of German, either High German or Yiddish. They keep to their own community. They have a style of dress that goes back to the 17th century. They have a shtetl or ghetto mentality. They live only among themselves. But that's what they do. They don't assimilate, and they don't attempt to force their way or their religious beliefs on anyone else. When did an Amish person ever crash airplanes into the World Trade Center, or when did a Hasidic Jew ever attempt to blow up Times Square and demand people accept their interpretation of Judaism or Kabbalah? They never did. There have always been non-assimilating communities, small ones, but most Jews are assimilated. Most German Americans are well assimilated, and most Dutch Americans are well assimilated. They are a minority. This is not true of Islamic immigrants. A very high percentage of Islamic immigrants refuse to assimilate into the popular culture in any country that allows them in. It is a much higher percentage. Secondly, they become parasites looking for a free ride on the back of the host country. In Islam, it's seen as their right that the infidel should have to pay them for not being a Muslim. So the Muslim should financially benefit from the infidel. In their mentality that they bring into multiculturalism, there is demitude, there's demi. They think it is fitting and right that the non-Muslim should pay them as a penalty for not being a Muslim. And they come to your country and demand it. This is their mentality. How is this culturally or socially desirable to any nation? There is not this willingness to be absorbed or assimilate into the main culture. Now, that it would not be true of Arab Christians and of certain westernized Muslims. But it is true of a disproportionately large amount of Islamic immigrants. The U.S. and Canada, the report highlights, did not become the countries they are by flying the flags of their own old country or bringing the legal system or the economic system of their old country, which was feudalistic. Bearing in mind, most of the economic systems in the Muslim world are today still feudalism. They came looking for a new legal system that was constitutional, a new economic system, and a new country with a new identity. They didn't come to bring the old with them. They came for a new beginning. Islam comes to spread Islam, to spread Dar el-Islam into the Dar el-Harb, to enforce its way on other people. Do I say that every Muslim does this? No. Do I say it is a basic tenet of fundamentalist Islam? Absolutely, that is evident. And those politicians who are lying to us and denying it, no, they're lying. Some of them, admittedly, are just ignorant people, stupid people who think with their emotions. You find a lot of this among liberal do-gooders. But the actual politicians themselves are playing a power game. Let us look further. This week in prophecy. What's coming increasingly into focus now that the Trump administration has carried out its promise to all but obliterate and destroy ISIS is the future of Syria. As we speak, there are still rebel factions, still Kurdish factions, who are holding areas of Syria. The Assad regime, backed by Russia, is not yet in complete control. Other areas are dominated by Turkey. There are remnants of jihadist forces also who are still active, albeit in much smaller numbers than they were. That is ISIS or those linked to ISIS. At the same time, Moscow has reasserted Russian presence in the region. This began not with Mr. Trump, certainly. It began with Mr. Obama, who drew a red line that meant nothing and showed the world he could not be taken at his word and that his word had no meaning, that he was basically a liar and a coward in the thinking and perception of Assad and of the Russians. He drew his red line, and when the red line was crossed, he said virtually and did absolutely nothing. They knew he was a bag of wind. That's what they knew him to be. That's what he was in their thinking, and the facts would unfortunately be on their side. This is not true of the Trump administration, but it has been true of the Obama administration that has created this nightmare. Where, after the Saddam Hussein regime was brought to an end, the vacuum was left that was filled by ISIS, which Mr. Obama allowed to happen. Now that ISIS is gone, there's another vacuum that is increasingly, as we've been warning, being filled by Iran. Iran and its ally Hezbollah in southern Lebanon want to play and have played a key role in the Syrian war by proxy. Shia militias helping the Baghdad government because they're Alawite, a sect of Shia, against the Sunnis. There is, again, a religious component that needs to be understood. To the Russians, it is purely political. To the Iranians, it is not. It is religious and political. Iran seems closer than ever establishing what it wants, a corridor from Iran to the Mediterranean. It is here where we have strongly disagreed with the positions of the Trump administration concerning the Kurds in order to placate Turkey. Turkey cannot be trusted, and we do see the Kurds as a viable obstacle to Iranian ambitions. They're also, as we've said repeatedly, the only major faction in northern Iraq or in eastern Syria who the West can to any degree trust. Be this as it may, you have a situation now where Moscow wants a strategically weak Syria. They do not want a militarily strong Syria, but they want a politically strong Assad regime. Iran desires the opposite. They desire a militarily strong Syria, influenced, if not controlled, by Iran, but a politically weak Assad who will do what he is told. Although the Russians and Iranians have interests in common concerning their support for Assad, they have two different perspectives of what they would like to happen. Iran wants a militarily strong Assad regime. Russia wants a weak one. Iran wants a politically weak regime. Russia wants a strong one. These things began coming to a head this week in prophecy. Washington has conducted limited operations against ISIS, but in doing so, it is indirectly helping Iran. We've been warning about this. The United States and Israel are finding themselves in an increasingly precarious position. Something needs to be done. The best thing that could be done, quite possibly, is for the United States, Israel, and the Kurds to attack Iranian positions from the Iranian border to southern Lebanon. The United States needs to reverse its position concerning the Kurds and needs to engage in a concerted campaign of attacking Iranian and Iranian-backed forces from Hezbollah through Syria and into northern Iraq. Now that ISIS has been largely obliterated, it is time for the United States and Israel to obliterate the military presence of Iran. This leaves the question, what will the Russians do? My guess would be the Russians wouldn't do anything. The attacks would not be focused on Assad. They would be focused on attacking the Iranians and on attacking Hezbollah. It would put Russia in a very precarious position. But as it is now, the United States and Israel are in a precarious position. And it will be a major issue in this forthcoming year of 2018, how these events will pan out. Their significance will be of the uttermost importance strategically and politically. But our real concern is that they will also be of the uttermost importance prophetically. That is This Week in Prophecy. Thank you so much for listening. My name is James Jacob Prasch. Please keep President Trump and Mr. Netanyahu in your prayers, along with the American troops fighting in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the IDF. Please pray God's protection upon them, and above all, pray that the gospel of Jesus will permeate the hearts of Jew and Muslim alike. Thank you so much. God bless.